Good evening. We're so happy to be here today. We've been here in the morning already in the German service, so we have the whole Stuttgart experience today. We do the whole program, everything you have. And it was a very nice service in the morning, and now we're having a very nice service in the evening, and I feel very blessed being with you. And I bring you greetings. I greet you from the church in Gelnhausen, and now I also greet you from the Barnabas Church in Frankfurt. And if you like, I would take back your greetings to our churches, because I always think we need to think of each other and not forget that we are not alone here. We have brothers and sisters all over Germany and all over the world, and we need to greet each other and think of each other. So if you like, I take your greetings. Today I want to read you a text from the Gospel of Mark. It's Mark 5, the verses 21 to 24 and 35 to 42. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw the commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why is all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. This is a text from the Gospel of Mark. And I think when I was here the last time, I told you that I'm deeply in love with the Gospel of Mark. It's just the best story. Mark he's such a good writer, and he's able to put everything in that story that a good story needs. So it's exciting and it's powerful, and through the Gospel of Mark, we are able to guide Jesus on his way from Galilee to Jerusalem, where he died on the cross for all of us. Sometimes I think, when I hear this, Jesus died on the cross for all of us. It is like it's for everybody. But today I want to look a little more on what Mark wants to tell the individual. Okay? So in the scripture reading, we heard the story of the healing of the daughter of Jairus. Jesus is on the way with his disciples, and he arrives on the other side of the lake and is immediately surrounded by a crowd of people. And we can see from the way Mark tells that this is nothing new. Where Jesus comes, people gather to see him, to hear him, to experience him. They take out their cameras and their smartphones. They make little videos as Jesus walks by and say, hey folks, look, Jesus is here, I'm here too, and I will follow him. And they put it on Instagram. When Jesus showed up, people got excited. And sometimes I wish that we would get the same excitement about the birth of Christ at Christmas that these people had back then when Jesus showed up. So here's a large crowd, and Mark picks one person from the crowd to tell a story. Jairus was a synagogue leader, so he was one of the more important people of the village, and the family was struck by a tragedy. The little daughter, only 12 years old, is so sick that she's dying. And that is terrible. And it's understandable that Jairus is completely desperate and grasps every chance. So when he hears that Jesus is coming to town, he realizes, this is my last chance. This is my last hope. He doesn't care what others think of him. He drops his whole dignity and throws himself at Jesus' feet like a simple slave or servant. And he begs Jesus to come with him and heal his daughter. And although Jesus was surrounded by all these people who all wanted something from him, he goes with this man. And it's clear to everyone in that situation that something big is going to happen. It will be a show. Jesus will do something. No one wants to miss it. So the whole crowd moves along with Jairus to his house. And while they are on the way to the man's house, friends of the man come up to them and say, it's too late. The daughter had died. She was only 12 years old, and now her life is over. In the house of Jairus, one had already begun with the mourning rituals. It was over. But Jesus, he's completely unimpressed by this. And he says the following to the men. Don't be afraid, just believe. And Jesus goes into the house, sends away all the mourners. He goes to the child and wakes her up. Wow, what a story. What looks like a tragedy turns out into a celebration. And by the way, we learn about Jesus that he can bring the dead back to life. Isn't Jesus great? Mm-hmm. But that's not the whole story. There is a violent interruption in the story of the healing of Jairus' daughter. And we read about it in Mark 5:25 to 34. Jesus is on his way to Jairus' house. And he's in a hurry. The daughter is dying. Every minute counts. He must not be late. He's surrounded and crowded by people, and then he notices that someone has touched his clothes and has been healed. And everything stops. In the middle of the crowd, Jesus stops and turns around and asks who that was. So Mark makes it really exciting here. We know time is short, and Jesus has to hurry to get to Jairus' daughter in time. Everyone has seen Jairus throwing himself in the mud in front of Jesus and begging him to come along. No one would dare to stop him now or stand in his way. It must go fast now. And we notice this by reading the text. And then Jesus stops because someone touched him. He stops and turns around and wants to know who touched him. Completely horrified that Jesus has noticed something, a woman comes forward. and she has been suffering from bleeding for 12 years. Let's have a little time out. I know this is the stuff we don't talk about in church. This is ugly. We prefer to avoid topics like this. Today we talk about it. I know it's a kind of a women's issue. And I know that probably most, maybe all men in this room may not be able to imagine how this feels. So I want to help you today. You may not like this. I want to give you a comparison. The ladies know what I'm talking about. You men imagine in the story a man came to Jesus and he suffered of incontinence for 12 years with cramps and pain. 12 years. So do we all feel equally uncomfortable now? Yeah? Good. I think we all now have a good idea of how this woman suffered. And the thing is that her suffering wasn't only physically. Her suffering was massively intensified by the society of that time. According to the law in Leviticus 19, people, especially women who had problems in this area, were excluded from society. The woman became unclean, and also everything she touched, that is people and objects. So in addition to her condition came social and cultural isolation. She could not go shopping. She could not meet friends. She could not go to the temple. She had nowhere to go. And this means she should not have been there at all. And most importantly, she shouldn't have been touching anyone. What she was doing there wasn't just kind of rude. It was a crime before the law. So socially speaking, the woman had already died 12 years ago. And in the meantime, she tried everything. She went to every doctor, she spent all her money on it, and nothing helped. No, it had even gotten worse. No, she was not only sick, lonely, excluded from society, she was also ruined. When she hears that this Jesus is coming to town, she realizes that this is her last hope. She doesn't care what others think. She doesn't care that she's not wanted here. And it is no coincidence that the woman touched Jesus just in this moment. It was the best opportunity for her. After all, no one was supposed to know that she was there. So she wanted to touch Jesus secretly and see what would happen. But that was not possible when Jesus was standing in the middle of a marketplace or in the middle of a crowd and preaching, and everybody was looking at him. But now there was a good chance. The situation of Jairus had attracted all attention, and everybody was busy getting to Jairus' house because there would be a great show soon, a miracle, and no one would see or notice her. She would just sneak up to Jesus, reach out her hand, and touch his robe. And in the same moment, She knows it immediately. She feels it in her body. And Jesus knows it too. And he says to her the following, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Jesus managed to do what no doctors could do. And by the way, we learn about Jesus that he can even heal without looking. He's really great. At the first sight, the Bible text looks like two healings happen shortly after each other. Jesus is on the way to the house of Jairus to heal the daughter of him, and on the way he heals the woman. But we're in the Gospel of Mark, and I can tell you there are no coincidences in the Gospel of Mark. Mark, of course, wants to tell us how great Jesus is, who can heal chronic diseases and raise people from the dead, but that's not all. There are many parallels in these two stories that I want to talk about today. And I have included a little test for you. You will see. Purity. Both are unclean. We already said that someone who had problems with body fluids was considered unclean. The same was true for a dead person. A dead body was considered unclean. And we said that uncleanness was a real problem at that time and excluded from society. But when Jesus heals the woman and wakes up the girl, they both are suddenly clean. From now on, they both are part of the society again. There is no reason to exclude them anymore. And what made them unclean, Jesus turns around. He has the power to make people clean. And not only that, he has the power to undermine society's understanding of purity. In that time, if one unclean person touches another, that person also becomes clean. And if a person touches a dead person, that person becomes unclean. But neither of these things happen with Jesus. On the contrary, instead of Jesus becoming unclean, the woman and the girl both become clean. So Jesus does something that had been completely impossible at that time and for them to do. And he completely turns the cultural understanding of the condition of these two upside down. Jesus makes pure even though it is medically, physically, socially, and culturally impossible. Jesus removes from their lives what makes it impossible for them to live a normal life. Jesus removes from their lives what does not belong there. Jesus removes from their lives what disturbs. That is what Jesus can do. That is what Jesus can do for you. Here comes the test. Do you believe that? You may say yes. Family. Have you noticed that both women are daughters? Yeah, I know all women are someone's daughter. But here, one is the daughter of Jairus, and the other one is called daughter by Jesus. No coincidences in the Gospel of Mark. Mark pushes the tension to the extreme here. We notice how urgently Jesus has to hurry to save Jairus' daughter, and then he is stopped. And at the climax of the drama, Jesus says to the woman, "My daughter, your faith has healed you." And the next sentence in the text is the friends of Jairus reporting to him, "Your daughter has died." That's a shocking moment. But it's not the end of the stories. Both are saved. One gets well, one lives. The daughter of Jairus is resurrected and returned to her family. She was dead, but now she is part of the family again. The woman is healed. It is the only time that Jesus addresses a woman in this way. She was lonely and alone, outcast from society, and Jesus calls her daughter. Jesus addresses her as a full member of the family of God. Now she belongs again, not only to society, but to the family of God. Through Jesus, you can be a part of the family, a part of the family of God. Jesus even gives you a new family. Do you believe that?
Yes.
The past. The girl was 12 years old, and the woman suffered from her disease 12 years long. No coincidences in the Gospel of Mark. The 12 is not a magic number. Don't search for that. Some like to read that into it, but it isn't. The girl was 12 years old, and thus she was shortly before the age to get married. This would be the end of her childhood, and a new phase of her life would begin. But sometime within these 12 years, she had become ill, which led to her death. The woman had battled her illness for 12 years. So both of them had a 12-year journey behind them, and there was nothing but hopelessness ahead of them. And then Jesus comes. And hopelessness turns into hope. Hopelessness and suffering are left to the past. Jesus heals the woman and wakes the girl from the dead. Suddenly they have a future again. They can dream again. They can make plans. They can live. The girl would soon marry and become a woman. And the sick woman would now live a healthy life. The 12 years that both of them have behind are in the past. And they don't matter anymore. I believe that with Jesus, your past no longer matters. Jesus gives a new life. He gives a new future. Do you believe that?
Yes.
New life. Jesus made both of them pure. He made them a part of the family. He left their past behind. Suddenly they are no longer sick. They can start over again. They are part of society. They belong. They have all possibilities again. Life is no longer hopeless. They have perspective. They have been given a second chance. They have been given a new life. We don't know what they have done with it. But we feel here in the story that Jesus gave them the life that would never have been possible for them. No doctors, no money could help the sick woman or prevent the little girl from dying. The new life they received was both physical and spiritual. And only Jesus could do that. There are second chances with Jesus. There is new life with Jesus. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Somehow the two miracles in the story have moved to the background. Mark uses this story to tell us more about Jesus. Namely, that Jesus can make us clean from everything that burdens or disturbs our life. That Jesus takes us into his family, and that the past doesn't count with Jesus. No matter what went wrong, he can give a new life. And that there is no way out, that there's hope with Jesus. That's what we really learned from the story, and even more. The key to these things to happen is made very clear in the Gospel of Mark. And it's also a parallel that appears in both stories. And this is faith. Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And to the woman he said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." In both cases, faith is the prerequisite for what happened. If Jesus is to do in our life what he did for these two, we have to have faith. But there's a problem. And Mark also points this out in his story. The sick woman sneaked up to Jesus in secret. And then when Jesus addresses her, we read, "But the woman was afraid and trembled." She was terribly afraid. And when Jairus received the news that his daughter has died, he panics. And Jesus has to say to him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Jairus was terribly afraid. Mark knows that fear is the opposite of faith. Fear hinders faith. How often do we allow fear to become so big in us that at the same time our faith shrinks? We cannot believe when we are afraid, and that's a problem. But Mark tells us here that Jesus has the power to lead people from fear to faith. Do you believe that?
Yes.
In our church services in Germany, there's a song that's very popular. Maybe you know it. It's called "Nur den Saum deines Gewandes." And there's no English version of the song. Otherwise, we could have sung it here. But I don't know any. So I've translated the first verse for you, but it's not singable. But when you read when I read the first verse to you, you will see that the text of the song is about the Bible text of today. Just touching the hem of your robe for one moment, and feeling the power that comes from you deep inside of me. Just a look from your eyes, just one word from your mouth, and healing streams flow, and my soul will be well. Do you believe that? I have to admit that I'm very easily afraid. Okay? What is Angsthase of English? That's me. Sometimes I wonder if I had been in Jairus' place and heard that my daughter had died, if I would not have ran away to my home, to my daughter. Maybe I would have left Jesus there in the street and run home to hold my child for the last time. Sometimes I wonder if I had been in the place of that sick woman, if I would have really dared to leave my house, mix with the people, break all the laws and rules, and if in the end, if I would really have had the courage to reach out my hand and touch Jesus. Would you? says to these two people, your faith has healed you. And don't be afraid, just believe. They overcame their fear and were thereby made pure from everything that did not belong in their lives. They became part of the family. They left their past behind and they received new life. Why? Because they overcame their fear and believed. This is the key element to the life that Jesus has in store for us. The life that Jesus made possible for us by coming to this earth on Christmas. Don't be afraid. Just believe. It's the key to the life that Jesus had in store for us. This is the key that the child in the manger brings to us. I don't want to have anything unclean in my life that prevents me from fully living. Jesus can do that for me and for you. Don't be afraid, just believe. I want to be called daughter by Jesus, or son. Through Jesus, you and I become part of the family of God. Don't be afraid, just believe. I don't want my past to determine my future. With Jesus' help, you and I can leave the past behind. Don't be afraid, just believe. I want to live a new life with Jesus, to have a second chance, a future, a perspective. Jesus has a new life ready for me and you too. Don't be afraid, just believe. Christmas lies before us, and we celebrate the day when Jesus came in this world to make all of this possible. Don't be afraid, just believe. Amen.